And welcome to another Show Will Go On webinar. This is episode 18. We've got just a few more episodes after this, and we're going to talk about ghost operations in this segment. So now don't be afraid. Ghost operations is a natural extension of everything we've been talking about for the past, several weeks. We've been building up to this. We'll keep building on this. My goal is for you to be very scalable. I want you to be able to make money in busy months and in slow months. I want you to reduce your risk, be prepared. We have a lot of things coming up ahead of us, some of which we don't even know. Let's make sure we have a business that can respond wisely to it. If you're new to the series, I'm Tom Stimson. I am a business consultant and advisor. I work exclusively in the professional audiovisual industry. Here's some places you can find me. Come visit. As I was saying in the pre-show, for those of you who get here early, I sometimes talk for a minute or two beforehand. Avixa has an event next. The next slide will talk about that, but Avixa supports this webinar series. They've made this possible for you. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, way back in March, they got on board, understood what we were trying to accomplish here, and have supported us, and we thank them very much for that. You can thank them, become a member. It's free at the individual level. Join a council or a committee. If you have not registered for the live events forum, you can do that while I'm talking here. Take a quick scan there, join the live events forum. It'll be, like I said, in 56 minutes. So let me help you. I'm still doing 15 minutes of free coaching for anybody who wants it. The call sometime run 20 minutes. We take a little bit longer sometimes. Had a couple already this week. Don't hesitate to schedule those. This will not go on forever. But if you need a checkup, and whatever it is, sometimes people just call and talk for 15 minutes so that I can listen and nod because they need to talk it out. Other people have serious questions that they need to ponder and get my feedback and opinion on. Whatever you need it to be, it's your call. I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm not going to take you anywhere that you didn't come prepared to go to. So bring your questions. I'm happy to help. Next week, we're going to talk about the pre-sale specifically for streaming events. How do you sell a streaming event for customers who don't know what they need? And sometimes we're not actually sure what it is that we're selling. So let's talk about that. Let's get that simplified a little bit for you and your team. Now, never mind. Let's move on. We're a little tight for time today. I want to wrap up a little bit early. If there are more questions than we have time for, I'll record answers and I'll put them up on the replay page in a Loom. So we'll do that. Okay. All right. So your job, your world, you're selling the invisible. But we need to make your overhead expenses disappear and reappear at will in order to do this. We don't always need all of these expenses in our lives. And we've been carrying a lot of operational overhead for years. But in the agency model, which you learned about last week, and if you didn't watch that video, go back and watch it. Lots of good feedback on it. It really pulls all the ideas together to help you understand how this is really going to work. This is the natural progression. If we understand how to run an agency business, which means that we don't have a full operational infrastructure all the time, we only have it when we need it. Now we need to learn how to run an operational infrastructure and what that might actually look like. So let me take you through this. You've seen this chart before in some fashion if you've been following me for any time at all. Let me got a fan running here in the background. I need to kill that. So remember the good old days, February, when your capacity used to be limited. You used to have to make strategic decisions about where to align your resources, which projects you could bid on and support, whether you were going to subrent for this job or that job. Remember those problems? Isn't that awesome? If you were a rental-based business with limited capacity in that era, you sold capacity. That is, you ran out of capacity. So you might live down here in this capacity-focused space where in the extreme, you never outsourced and you never went to look for new customers. You had a very core customer profile, a specific type of customer you sold to. If you ran out of stuff, you quit doing it. So if you're way down here and you never outsourced and you didn't try and find any new kinds of customers to serve, you live down here in the corner. But if you're a little bit more open-minded, if you might pick up some extra movers to fill out an order, outsource a little bit, hire some outside labor, maybe you don't just sell B2B, you might also sell B2C, which is a different type of customer. You might be somewhere else besides the corner of this quadrant, okay? Now, one way to extend your capacity if you're a rental business, dry hire rentals or B2B rentals, wholesale rentals, one way to extend your capacity is to focus on a specific type of customer. Occasionally, rental companies become event companies because they want that event business. They see the opportunity there, but they only want a certain type of customer. And so they start looking for customers that are a perfect fit, a best fit, that are doing a very specific type of event or project that the capacity-focused business can well serve. They're trying to minimize their outsourcing, but they are opened up to the idea of new customers. Now, another path you can go is to go deeper and wider into an organization, and you can be a B2B rental company and your customers are asking for, well, we'd like you to add audio or lighting or LED. And, oh, by the way, we'd like you to prep the order or prep the job for us, like production rental. These are expanded offerings, often to the same customers, or maybe to slightly different customers, which kind of pulls you up on the chart. Now, all of this is a good way of saying, you know, as we move through these phases, and you can start in any one place or you can move from one to the other, but very often you have a part of your business that belongs in one quadrant and another part that belongs in another. Sometimes you're in all three quadrants. Okay? Now that fourth quadrant, which says we're open to any kind of customer and we'll do any kind of work within our specific field of work because we're not afraid of outsourcing and we're not afraid of new customers and new challenges and new projects. In other words, we'll take some risk and do bigger and better things for clients, hopefully at a higher margin, but that puts us into a quadrant where we have unlimited growth potential. And the interesting thing that we're seeing right now is as we see more and more streaming events, we're finding that most streaming is a little bit up into, if not well into, this upper right-hand quadrant. Now, there is some streaming work down here and a little bit over here and a little bit over here, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to get you to this idea that there's always another frontier that you can move to, and right now we're faced with needing to move into a different frontier. So, for instance, streaming and hybrid events require a lot of enterprise selling skills and unlimited fulfillment bandwidth, things that you would normally use up in the upper right-hand quadrant. But even if we're just a transactional business doing capacity selling, a studio is a capacity. You can't rent the same studio twice at the same time, right? Though I know some of you have probably tried or really wish you could. You might put together streaming systems. So if you're in the bottom left-hand quadrant here, if this is your space and you're trying to expand your business, you might be looking at some new types of products. If you're looking for specific types of customers that want to buy a specific thing, a package, one type of an event, then you might put together package streaming systems for them. I'm going to get to the operational side of this. I want to make sure we understand that there's a business strategy that operations has to respond to, right? So package streaming events are going to serve that best fit customer. I'm going to create a package that fits their needs, not a package that could fit anyone's needs, because I'm going to focus on a very specific customer. If I want to go deeper and wider into organizations, then I have to be prepared to add the packages and systems that they need. So I may have package streaming events, but I have to be willing to add content, even if I outsource it, or add a platform, even if I outsource it. And then if I want to get up into full service streaming events, where I'm providing the platform, the content, the execution, the replay, even the strategic advice about how to best execute the outcome they're intending to do. Okay, there's a lot of elements, and many of you have discovered that if you take on a streaming conference and you're the prime contractor, it's not just throwing some gear in a corner of your warehouse and recording a few videos. Okay, there's a lot of aspects to this that you're being responsible for. So keep that in mind as we're walking through this. Because the question you want to answer is, what operation do I need? Which is the operational style that we need? In many of the conversations I've been having, particularly over the past 8 weeks, as you've been winding down your businesses and de-escalating the amount of overhead that you have, there's a tendency to want to hold on to operations so that when events come back, we don't lose this talent or this skill set. Or, what if this person goes freelance and I can't hire them back for the jobs that I need them for? These are all valid concerns, but they deny the reality of supply and demand. All right, so if we keep resources because we might need them, we are running the risk that we can't afford to stay open for as long as we need to stay open until more normal business or more consistent business resumes. So when I say more normal business, I don't mean getting back to the way things used to be. I mean just a little bit better churn, a little bit more activity that's a little bit more consistent, where it's easier for people to commit to having a meeting or an event, a hybrid event, and stick to it, rather than what we're seeing right now is a lot of Q4 events rethinking or pulling the plug on those events. And we were banking on that. Take that as a sign that you need to pay attention to the formula that I have on the right-hand side here. If we sell something at cost and add a margin to it, you will always make a profit. No doubt about it. That's the way it works. Cost plus margin equals profit every single time. There is no negative outcome. You can't add a negative margin. The formula that many of us are used to using is that we hope we have income which we can remove our costs from, and there might be money left over. And that's the model we have to give up. That's what agency is telling us we need to abandon. So how do I make an operation work in that model? So the first step, I would say, if you and I are having a conversation about this, I would say, what is it that you are really good at? As a business owner, what is it that you're really good at? Where do you like to be? And if you say, well, I like doing events the old way, let's get past that. What is it about doing events the old way that you like? Because that's probably what you're good at. Are you good at selling? Are you good at planning? Are you good at organizing and bringing parts and pieces together? Understand what that is, and then build a lean, scalable operation to support that. Now, you have 3 aspects of operational demand. You have ongoing demand, which we're not seeing a lot of right now. There's not daily orders. There's not stuff coming in at the last minute. There's not something that we need to be doing every single day. There's recurring demand, which are planned events that we can bank on, okay? The company has this meeting twice a month or once a year. These are recurring demands that we can kind of work our schedule around. And then we have the inevitable spikes in demand. The spikes in demand that we're seeing right now is that many of you are companies that are used to doing a $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 event, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a streaming environment where the scale of the event you're supporting is 10 times larger. It may be not 10 times more money, but it's a huge spike in the scope of work and the footprint. I have in one of my coaching groups, one of the guys has an annual event that he does. It's usually 4,000 attendees. I think they had 26 attendees, but they had 6,000 streaming attendees. Okay? That's a huge spike in demand because the number of things they had to do to support the ongoing stream, the stream was much bigger and much more important than the actual live event. So we're seeing some spikes in that demand right now. Now, there's also 3 business models. And I'm going to work each one of these with you because there's a slightly different operational response for each one. In the B2B model, and many of us have a B2B component, a B2C component, we might even have a specialty component to what we do, but in general, most of us are one of these most of the time. So a B2B model would be obviously any wholesale rental, any services that support the industry. If your customer is on this webinar right now, you are probably a B2B company. Okay? B2B companies tend to be capacity focused. They are often very transactional, even though they might be doing an event, because they are at the lower end of the food chain, of the value chain in all of this. Now, B2C companies tend to focus more on full service events and projects. They fit into those two corner quadrants, the upper left and the bottom right, of best fit or expanded offerings. And then niche companies are often a B2B type business, but they're very specialized. Now, as we're going to see, those are the ones that are most significantly impacted by what's going on with us right now, in terms of may actually have more opportunities than some of the other folks do. So let's see what this looks like. In a B2B business, we typically find, you down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you have an equipment list. Here are the packages that you have. When you're out of capacity, you're out of capacity. Maybe you'll hire out some more, maybe go buy some new gear to fill an order. But right now, those would be great problems to have if we had any activity at all. So this is where we often live, but in our new normal, in this streaming world of, pandemic and hopefully one day post-pandemic business, our demand is shifting. Our opportunity to be effective has to move. So if we try and stay in that little box down there in the corner, our opportunities are very, very few. They're very thin. In B2B work, as any of the wholesale rental companies will know, you guys don't have enough business to need extra gear, so their phone isn't ringing. It doesn't matter how big you are. There's not a lot of demand for outsourced equipment right now. Most of us have way more than we actually need. So those companies need to shift their focus up into a little bit cloudier area where they wander over even into the other quadrants a little bit. So the strategy of a company like this, who, by the way, is probably already awesome at supply chain. Okay? They understand where they fit into the supply chain. They know how to meet demand. They know how to ship gear. They know how to turn equipment. They know how to create packages for that core customer. Well, the demands from that core customer are different right now. The equipment that they need to sub-rent is the equipment they've never owned because they didn't do streaming events before. So in your B2B strategy in that quadrant, you would be creating packages to meet the demand of that customer. You're going to focus a lot on capacity planning. You're going to limit your operational schedule based on demand, right? You might make time windows for new orders. A typical conversation I'm having with companies like this is, set a prep schedule. Say you have prep windows of Monday, Wednesday, Friday where you're prepping orders, which means that if a customer wants something on Wednesday morning, we're probably going to have to prep it on Monday. And if they want it first thing Wednesday morning, they need to receive it or pick it up on Monday. So we can manage that timeline to minimize our operational footprint. So ship earlier, allow longer rental periods. They just need it Wednesday and Thursday. You can get it back on Friday, but they need it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You're not going to get it back till Monday, right? Because that's when you're available to receive it back again. You can still do don't panic, salespeople. Hot shot orders can still occur as needed. It's expensive. We're going to have to bring in a dedicated crew just to prep this order. It's not going to go. We're not going to open up the shop, to rent a screen. Now, in the operational model for B2B, you have to meet the customer where they are. And I get all of your promotional emails. I sign up for your newsletters. And so this is stuff I received while I was literally building this deck. AB Strategy, who I consider a B2B rental company. They primarily serve the industry, wholesale type rentals. But here they are, they're introducing a product which is a package, which is a streaming support kit, which also has a B2C attraction. So they're wandering out of their little corner down here up into a best fit customer who needs a package that does this. They have presenters remotely, they need it themselves. They also know that you might need this because you're doing projects where you have multiple presenters that need to be supported through your systems. So this is a beautiful response that's illustrating exactly what I'm talking about. Operationally, we've got to meet that need. Right now, when we're open is another discussion altogether. So in B2B operations, we're going to do things like order batching. We're going to focus on prep times and sequences. We're going to know exactly how long it takes to prep something so that we don't have any more labor in the shop than we need to get the orders done that we need to do. At worst, we might stay a little bit late. Hopefully, we'll finish a little bit early. Your staff, your team of employees are the supervisors. When there's not much to prep, the supervisors can do all the prep. When there's a lot to prep, the supervisors are making sure that the part-timers that are coming in are well supervised so that we protect the quality of the product. So you're going to book help in time blocks, and you're going to have a specific set of things that you need to get done. It's just project management, right? Your operation, zero state warehouse, zero state inventory. There is no in-between status for anything. When we de-prep something, we QC it, we get it back on the shelf. If we have to, we want to repair it in the time block that's allotted. Okay, we want to prioritize returns over prep because your prep will go faster if everything is de-prepped and returned and back on the shelf. We can reduce prep time by spending more time and energy on returns and de-prep time. And at the end of the day, the shop is pristine. Everything's back in place. When we have a shop call again, everything will be where it's supposed to be. We can find it. There's no looking for anything. Now, you'll do a lot of just-in-time shipping. That means sometimes you're going to ship early. We're going to have to be pretty flexible about how long things are out if I'm going to keep a lean operation. Make sense? Now, in the B2C world, and B2C can be consumers, but it's really also corporations. You're dealing with commercial enterprises. Sometimes that could be an independent producer between you and the end client, but let's face it, the independent producer or the reseller in our current business climate, their value is being diminished. Many of you should be going around them, for lack of a better description, particularly if you're in the B2C world, and reduce the middleman between you and the economic buyer. But that's probably a different series of webinars to talk about. B2C companies spend time in one or both of these quadrants. Typically, we'll see one. So the corporate event staging company, that traditional company that works for producers and event planners to do full service events for corporate clients, generally live in this top left-hand quadrant. They're looking for a perfect fit, somebody who's buying what they're selling so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, we have the audio, video, lighting, LED support, crew, planning, logistics to support that event. We're great at doing multi-level marketing or association events or general sessions or maybe breakout rooms, as long as they fit the mold of what you do. You're looking for customers that are buying what you're selling. If they're in the bottom right hand, they're taking existing customers that they have and trying to leverage more out of them. For instance, this is very true if your work is really direct to corporate. That corporation or a division of that corporation may have another need. This group you do sales meetings for. This group you help them with their expo work. These people you're creating marketing experiences for. You're going deeper and wider into that organization, and they're often going to ask for things that aren't your core business, but you're more than happy to do it. You're not looking for that perfect fit. You're looking for that relationship where we can provide whatever that customer needs, which means we're very comfortable with outsourcing. So streaming and hybrid events, so as we are learning, require a lot of enterprise selling and outsourcing to make all of this work. So the model for these companies, we find that they're going to have to go here. The people that are used to selling best fit are going to have to get down there into the accommodating mode of helping their clients solve problems that they don't normally solve. So you have to get out of your comfort zone. Likewise, you have customers, if you normally live down here in the bottom right, you have customers who need cookie cutter solutions. They need packaged, high value, low cost solutions. They need a shorter path to get there, in which case packages, which are the mainstay of people who work in the upper left-hand quadrant doing best fit work, are going to be important. You're not going to customize as many things to help them. So both of these types of B2C companies are going to have to spend some time in these other spaces, which means they're effectively in that upper right-hand quadrant, which is awesome because that's unlimited growth, right? You can, once you get your footing in there, anything people come to you with is solvable. If you can create revenue and profit out of it, okay, if you can figure out what it costs and add margin to it, okay, there's a lot of things you can be doing in that upper right-hand quadrant, and that's what we need to find. And this applies, I mean, all of this applies whether you're a live event company or you're an integration company or anywhere in between, because it's the same formula. Cost plus margin equals profit. What are you willing to do? Okay, what's the cost you're willing to manage for that customer and add margin to? And that determines what quadrant you're in. And if you're agnostic about what the costs are, and you're willing to do a project that's a hybrid between streaming, in-person rental, and a permanent installation and a product sale, look at you. You're an enterprise company and you're making money in a lot of different ways. And that's one way, that's one strategy for getting through this mess that we're currently in. So what we're seeing right now in the B2C world, you know, is that where most of you are struggling and where a lot of the conversations I'm having with you are about your customers is they don't know what they need. They're in crisis. They thought everything would be solved and that they could, you know, get back and have their in-person meeting in August or September. And here they are. And right now they're panicked. So they don't know what they need and they're not confident that you can help. But if they do ask you, your strategy, you have to be prepared. You should be expecting these calls, even if you're confident that they're going to have their November event. As I've been saying since late March, get ahead of your customer. Get out in front of this thing. There's a really high chance that their majority in-person event is suddenly going to become a majority streaming event. And they're going to have to make a shift, and they need to know that you're the company that's going to shift with them. So operations is more about providing advice, expertise, and systems, okay, in this streaming world, because 80% of the job is pre-production. The actual event is pretty simple, okay, when you get right down to it. It's still just a show. Some of the tools may be unfamiliar, the environments, the platforms may be unfamiliar, but if you do all of the pre-production in it, it's going to go swimmingly, right? But there's a lot more pre-production involved than what we're used to, and it's pre-production with the client and with the content and with the brands, not just us back in the shop cranking out drawings and prepping gear and throwing on extra gear. So in general, you'll find that the streaming projects require less hardware and on-site execution unless it's a hybrid event, in which case we've got 2 shows. Now, in your operational strategy, you can be very flexible about when you prep. If it's a streaming event and your operation is available to prep it a week in advance, why not do that? You can do that. There's probably nothing in between now and then. So you can fit that into your schedule. And of course, we have to meet the customer where they are in the B2C model too. And here's another example. This is, again, I'm just following the emails that I'm getting. This is meeting tomorrow. You know, here's something on their website about the return on live streaming, the benefits of broadcasting your conference. They're positioning themselves as an expert on this topic, which is going to make their customer or potential customer more comfortable with talking about the streaming option for their upcoming event. So they may have been probably in one of these two quadrants. I won't judge for you where they were, but on the basis of this little bit of marketing here, they're now very comfortable being up here in that upper right-hand quadrant to help develop that business and make their customers more comfortable bringing them very complex, multi-layered opportunities. Now, your operations in this B2C model. Obviously, you've got more involved prep. There's actually a show. There's something physical in place that you're responsible for, managing a studio or a location site or an actual ballroom. So order prep scheduling is key, right? The more you plan, the less prep time it takes. Spend more time planning so you can spend less time prepping. The zero state warehouse is a must-have. It's important for all of these models. Okay, at the end of the day, I got an ad from a facility where I've held an event, and it's a for rent facility, and it's actually got a huge commercial kitchen and cooking stations because they built it to actually do cooking classes. And you can rent this facility for $2,100. They have 3 days a week that you can have this facility for $2,100 a month. What a deal. If you needed a commercial kitchen, even if you only needed it twice a month, this is a bargain. However, at the end of the day, you have to restore everything back to the zero state. Everything's got to be cleaned, everything's got to be put away, everything's got to be sanitized at the end of every day. That's what I'm talking about in your warehouse. Tomorrow, any crew should be able to walk in and pick up work and get it done. Now, again, your staff or supervisors, they have to know how to prep a show in your system, okay? But you can bring in the physical work. This is no different than doing a show. We can send out crew chiefs and bring in stagehands, and the crew chiefs supervise the stagehands. Okay? It doesn't diminish the quality of your work. The stagehand isn't on staff. What only diminishes the quality of your work is if you put the wrong person in charge, right? So if you're going to keep people on staff, they have to be a warehouse supervisor one day, maybe a job site supervisor the next, helping with pre-production the next, talking a client off the cliff about why this is not going to work or why it's going to work. You have to pick the people who are really versatile, but aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes to get the job done. The more work you have in your pipeline, the farther ahead you're going to have to plan. You've got specialized part-timers you're going to have to bring in at certain moments. You're going to have to book help on a project-by-project basis. You still don't need a full-time warehouse crew unless you're doing a ton of work, in which case it might start to make sense. We talked about that a few weeks ago. This is really about planning the use of your zero state environment where jobs can be prepped and equipment can be pulled from your inventory where it's sitting ready to go on the shelf. Now, the niche business or that specialized business, those guys generally have lived close to the center. A very typical example, just to make it easy for all of us to understand, and because it does work with the example I'm going to share with you in a minute, is somebody who does projection mapping. So they've decided that that's their niche, that's what they're really good at. They really understand how to create experiences through projected images on surfaces wherever they may be. Now, they are generally capacity driven, but they're also pretty comfortable with outsourcing, because if you're running 20 projectors and you need another 20 to make the job work, you're going to go rent them. You don't blink. You don't think twice about it. They're going to outsource labor. But what's interesting is who their customer could be. Because on one day, their customer could be one of you guys that needs help with a projection mapping job that you sold, which is very much a B2B transaction. But the next day, it could be an economic development council that is doing a promotion for the Chamber of Commerce. And now they're dealing with an institutional entity, worse, a public entity, even worse, a committee. And that pushes them up into that upper right-hand quadrant as far as that type of customer will let them go, which is not very far typically. So in our new world, in our new operational model, dealing in the agency model, these companies have to morph much more broadly. Their footprint is really no different from anybody else in our chart. Okay. Whether they are brought in as a subcontractor working for one of you guys, or they have a customer who needs something very specifically well-defined that fits their profile, or somebody who wants that plus content creation plus site management, maybe some audio, video, and lighting to go along with it, or somebody who wants them to manage the entire brand experience for experiential marketing. Okay? They've got to be willing to move into any of these spaces, which means that their operation has to morph dramatically. So there is no base operation that makes sense for them, because for any given job, they may need something that's completely different than what they were doing last week. So specialty strategies, if you're a niche company, it's all project-based, and the operation you need next week is based on the project you're doing next week. Okay? The institutional knowledge about how to do what your specialty is, like projection mapping, is built into your staff. The staff you retain have to have the institutional knowledge about how to do projection mapping. Everything else you can outsource. Okay? The energy to generate income is always focused around the specialty. Okay? You may get some broad work, but hopefully that specialty is tucked in there. Otherwise, you may be expending some energy that you shouldn't be expending. Let's face it, if you've got a bunch of $100,000 projectors sitting in the warehouse, you probably shouldn't be chasing $5,000 streaming jobs, right? So you also have to be relevant with the times. What do we need streaming for right now? Well, it's different than it was 4 or 5, 6 months ago. So what is relevant? Are you setting up temporary art museums that people can drive through so they don't get out of their cars? I mean, what is it? How is it relevant? It may just be the drive-in theater model, okay, which would fit a specialty projection mapping company, might bring themselves down to doing projection for an outdoor award ceremony. That's not completely off the mark, right? But they're not going to do an event that's just, speakers on a sticks and some lights that doesn't have any video in it. So their operations in this model is completely on demand. Most of the time, their warehouse has no personnel working in it. There's nothing to do. Zero state is very important, because without a dedicated warehouse staff, the people who are responsible for putting it back in zero state are often not really operations people. I mean, we're lucky if they're project managers or technical specialists, but they're not necessarily the people that you want responsible for your warehouse. So leadership's going to have to pay attention that we protect that zero state, because this is what allows you to have a lean operation. And as soon as you let that go, all of a sudden that next job we need to prep, well, we got to come in a day early because we got to get everything. We got to repair those projectors, and we got to put the stuff back, and we haven't unfinished packing that last thing. No, okay? You just made the prep for the next job longer. You just blew your efficiency, which might have been your profit margin. Okay? Get the work done when the work needs to get done. Now, here's an example. Here's a company that has traditionally done huge projection mapping jobs, Immersive. Now they're focusing on a diverse group of events that are very relative to the current times. So they give a couple of examples in there. So they've repositioned themselves so they're not just a B2B supplier. They're actually working with creators and designers and people in the concept world who are coping with the dynamics of what events need to be right now in these special circumstances. And so they've very much moved out of here's our box and here are the things that we do into here's all the places that we can work, and the talent that they've retained in this new environment is specific to the diversity of the types of opportunities that they're getting. Operations in a business like this, the warehouses, there's nobody there, okay, until you need it. And then all of a sudden we turn the lights on and we go in and we get the work done. Now, operations in a specialty business, prepping is very much a pre-build. If you've done this kind of work before, any kind of specialty work, we don't just trust the equipment to work on show site or job site. We set it up, we pre-test it, we make it happen before we go out. Then we pack it up and we go. It's very much like you would prep for a touring environment. Build it, test it, then you pack it. It's more difficult to get back to the zero state for the reasons I stated earlier, but if you skip that step, you're going to undo all of your efficiency. And if you have labs or studios, they need to be separate from warehouse operations. And very often you have a laboratory in a company like this where they test things out and they demo stuff and they're trying to figure stuff out. And it's always in a disarray. I mean, it looks like a mad scientist laboratory. That has to be separate from operations, right? When the lab needs something, they need to check it out from operations. It goes into the lab environment with the lab as the customer. When the lab is done with it, operations checks it back in on an operational schedule, receives it back in, deprep it, restore it, get it back to zero state, put it on the shelf, right? So separate those two things. It'll make your life much, much easier. So scan stuff out to work in the lab or work in the studio if you're setting up a studio. Speaking of which, for all of you who have set up studios in your warehouse and then suddenly realize that if you have a job to prep, they can't work while the studio is working, hello, welcome to my world. That's what we're talking about here. So a product the studio product is managed by operations because it is a tactical scheduling challenge. The studio has to have a zero state. At the end of this project, we take out the things that are not part of the zero state of the studio and we'll restore everything back to zero state until there's a next job that we're going to prep in that space. The operations needs to do the project schedule for studios, hire the crews that come in, because it has to work in sync and in tandem with the operations needs in the warehouse. Warehouse schedule has to work around the broadcast schedule. Don't sell 3 days of studio on a 24-hour clock. Understand what the client needs. Say, here's when you should be recording and tell them when to record so that you can schedule your other warehouse needs. And who cares if you got to prep a show at 10 p.m. because the studio was active all day, because you're getting to prep a show, right? Think differently about operations, okay? Now, we're going to have a little bit of time for some questions, but I have some questions for you. Think about your business. Think about what I've just described. Does your business fit neatly into any one of those systems? Are you a B2B company exclusively, B2C, or are you specialty? Are you a niche business? Which one are you? And if you're a little bit of all three, can you define when you are one and not the other? Okay. Now, is having a lack of clarity about that, not maybe within you yourself, but within the team, creating excess operational capacity? Is there a warehouse manager or an operations manager that tells you that we need people in case something happens? Is it because they don't understand that what might happen is not how things used to be? And we need to introduce them to a different understanding of the types of business that you do and when operations actually needs to be preparing. What they should be doing right now is getting their business to a zero state, which will reduce a lot of these concerns. And the third question for you, is your operation tooled for current needs, or are you really a variant on how things used to be? And we just modified our February model to accommodate the streaming stuff and these service jobs that don't have a lot of hardware in them? Or are you retooling your business knowing that this is what you're going to have going forward for quite a long time, right? So that's what we should be doing as management. I had one of my coaching calls, one of the discussions we had was, what do you do with managers who don't understand that they should be generating value even though we don't have any work? This is what managers should be doing. They should be figuring out how to do this. Make them go back. Are they watching these videos? If they're not, make them go back and watch and write a report about how this affects your business and what recommendations or ideas they have to apply the ideas that make sense for your company. They need to be engaged. These things aren't just going to manifest themselves, and they can't sit around and wait until things get back to normal, because honestly, we're not going to see anything that looks like normal anytime in the predictable future probably for the next 2 years. So having said that, we've got about 8 minutes. We can answer some questions. Remember, I'm going to let you go early because I want you to all attend the live events forum hosted by Avixa, which starts at the top of the hour. And let me see what's been going on in the chat. Well, not a lot of questions. Okay, so there are no salespeople on this at all. Great. Let me tell you the questions that you should be asking. Right now in the US, for those of you in the US, there might be an extension to the unemployment insurance supplement, the $600 a week supplement that your furloughed employees have been getting. Most of you are at a pivot point right now. Even if that is extended, the longer you keep people on furlough, the longer you have to extend the belief that you're going to ever hire them back and they might need to be moving on. I want you to take the information from this webinar and think hard about your business, about how many operational people on furlough you need to bring back versus let them find the next thing that they need to be doing. Some of them are going to go into the freelance market. Some of them are going to go into the crowd sharing market, where you're going to all be hiring from the same freelance pool as we've talked about. Let them know what those opportunities are, but figure out what your operational model is, so it's nimble, it's adaptable, it's scalable, and you can keep the doors open longer by extending your cash flow runway, by reducing your overhead expenses. Make this work for everyone, but it's going to take a little bit of planning. And operations is our biggest cost center of all the labor money that we spend for staff and employees. Operations is using 75% of it. So let's get that model under control. Let me go back. Somebody asked me what's the link for the forum I just mentioned. Let me go back up to the top of the thing here and pull your phone out. Scan that QR code, go register. As soon as you register, it dumps you right into the media site. So as soon as the event is live, you'll be there. It's a media site run event, so please join us for that. Hey, I'm a sponsor, so please, I implore you, come join this event. What else do we have to talk about? Okay, pretty thin on questions. That means that we have more time to get a break before this next thing starts. So live event forum starts in 10 minutes. Please shoot me any questions you have. I'm happy to answer them by email, and I'll probably share the response back with the replay page so that everybody will get that answer. We only have a couple more of these. We're going to talk about pre-sale next week. On the 29th, we're going to do financial review. And that's it. This is 18, 19, 20, and we're done. Okay, this series will be over. I'm going to move on to the next thing. You guys are now prepared to move on to the next thing, or you will be after 2 more of these webinars. So thank you for sticking with me. We're coming to the end, but make sure you get your questions in before we run out of time. So I will see you guys next week. Check your mailbox, and don't forget to come back and share this replay with whoever needs to see it. Be well, be safe. I'll see you at the forum.